They say a child is a gift, a blessing some wait years for, watering hopes with patience and prayer. Others, with heavy hearts, choose adoption, believing it's the best chance for their child to grow, to be safe, and to be loved. But what if you gave your child away, imagining her laughter in a sunlit playground, only to later learn she was buried near a chicken coop, wrapped in a dirty blanket, hidden behind her own home? This is the story that shattered hearts across Indonesia, the case that made mothers hold their children a little tighter, the case of Engeline Megawe. It started quietly. On May 16, 2015, around 5 p.m., a Facebook post began circulating. Find Angeline, Bali's missing child. It was shared by Christina, her foster sister living in the United States. Another sister, Yvonne, printed posters, desperate to find her. Within hours, the search for Angeline went viral, not just in Bali, all across Indonesia. People followed the updates, hoping for a miracle. But along with the attention came questions. Neighbors had noticed things. They spoke of how the little girl was treated at home, how she was often alone, how shouting echoed from behind the gates, how she seemed afraid. Some saw signs of physical abuse, others heard it. Her foster mother, 7-year-old Marguerite Christina Megawe, told the world she adored Angeline. But during the investigation, her demeanor didn't match her words. Cold, detached, as if this wasn't her missing daughter, as if it didn't concern her. Then, nearly a month later, June 10th, 2015, the case took a devastating turn. Police discovered a small body in the backyard of the house on Jalan Sedap Malam in Denpasar, the same backyard where Angeline once played. She had been buried under trash, decomposing alone. The country mourned, but there was more. 2 people were arrested. One was the household helper, Agustai Hamba. The other was the person who had once taken Angeline in, Marguerite Christina Megawe. So who was Angeline? What happened behind closed doors? And how did a child, once seen as a blessing, become the center of a tragedy that still echoes in people's hearts? Her name was Engeline. Some called her Angeline. She was born on May 19, 2007, in a small clinic in Canggu, just a tiny baby in a big, uncertain world. Her mother, Hamida, was only 15 when she left her hometown of Banyuwangi in search of work. Times were hard and opportunities were few. In Bali, she met Ahmad Roshidi, a construction laborer. They married, they started a family, but by the time their 3rd daughter was born, the marriage had fallen apart. The children were split. The eldest, Ina, went to live with their father's family. The middle child, Aisha, stayed with her grandmother. But where was Angeline? To answer that, we have to go back. Before her birth, while still pregnant, Hamida was already struggling. She couldn't afford proper nutrition, let alone the cost of a hospital delivery. Overwhelmed and desperate, she broke down in tears at the clinic. That's when someone introduced her to a woman named Marguerite Christina Megawe. Marguerite offered help. She would pay the hospital bills, cover the postpartum treatment. In return, she wanted to adopt a child. So, accompanied by her husband, Douglas Scarborough, Marguerite visited Hamida. She handed her 800,000 rupiah, which was around $84 at the time, and another million rupiah after the birth. 3 days later, before Hamida even had the chance to name her baby, the newborn was taken. Marguerite named her Angeline after her own mother, Angelina Sumilat. Douglas didn't sign any documents. The adoption was never formalized through the court. There was only a notary note signed on May 24, 2007, that gave Marguerite parental rights. It also came with conditions. Marguerite was to love Angeline as her own daughter, to name her as one of her heirs. If anything were to happen to the child, the inheritance would go to another heir. There were even clauses that forbade Hamida and Ahmad from seeing their daughter until she turned 18. And that would never happen. For a while, Angeline seemed happy. People adored her. Her wide eyes, her bright smile, her warmth. She quickly became the youngest in the Megawe family, gaining 2 older foster sisters. Yvonne, then 47, and Christina, 38. At home, she learned English with Marguerite, and she picked it up fast. She was curious, playful, smart. People who met her said she radiated joy. The family moved often, from Bali to Pekanbaru, then Bekasi, and back again. But wherever they went, Angeline brought light with her. Oddly, the one who seemed to love her the most was Douglas. Though he hadn't adopted her legally, he treated her like a treasure. He hugged her, kissed her, spoiled her. He became her safe place. But that changed. On September 17th, 2008, Douglas passed away. And from that point on, something in Marguerite unraveled. The grief hit her hard, so hard that she couldn't focus at work, couldn't think straight. But instead of seeking help, instead of talking to someone, she turned inward. And then she turned on Engeline. The little girl became the outlet for her foster mother's pain. Marguerite began ordering her to clean the house, mop the floors, do the laundry, and feed the pets, chickens, dogs, cats. The smallest mistake would result in harsh punishment. Sometimes it was a slap, other times worse. Angeline was only 8. She was small for her age, and the tasks were endless, especially the chickens. Dozens of them kept in a coop almost the size of a shed, filled the air with feathers and filth. On some days, Angeline would forget to feed the last few, and when that happened, Marguerite didn't just scold her, she hit her. At school, the changes in Angeline didn't go unnoticed. She stopped smiling. The cheerful girl who once lit up the classroom now stared blankly ahead, sometimes dozing off during lessons. Her teachers watched her grow thinner by the week. One day, her classmates reported a terrible smell. When the teacher checked, she found Angeline's hair matted with chicken waste. She was taken to the school bathroom, and her teacher washed her, something no child should have to go through. The school tried to understand what was happening. They asked her what her mornings looked like, and what she said broke their hearts. Before school, Angeline cleaned the house, fed the animals, prepared her own lunch. Her classes started at noon, but her day began much earlier. She walked nearly 2 kilometers to get to school, sometimes a bit shorter if she cut through the rice fields. She arrived sweaty, sometimes hungry, but she never asked for food. She was too afraid. When questioned, Marguerite claimed Angeline just refused to eat, that she only wanted milk. But when teachers offered her a warm meal, she ate everything, even went back for seconds. The school knew they had to do something. The headmaster, Ketut Ruta, even offered to adopt her. But Marguerite refused. She said Angeline had duties at home, that no one else could take over. She insisted there was no abuse, only love, that the chores were about teaching discipline. But the teachers didn't buy it. They reported the case to the National Child Protection Commission, and soon after, a team came to visit the house. What they found was telling. The smell of chickens hit them before they even reached the front door. The yard was lined with coops, nearly 100 chickens in tight, dirty enclosures. Inside, the commission asked to see Angeline's room. What they found wasn't a child's room at all. Just a small, dim space with trash scattered around, and a window facing the chicken coop. The stench from outside filled the room. Chicken feathers floated through the open gaps. When they mentioned their concern, when they suggested taking Engeline into protective custody, Marguerite lost control. She threatened them, saying she would kill anyone who tried to take Engeline from her. As the search for Engeline stretched on, so did the questions. Even 2 high-ranking government officials, the Ministry of State Apparatus Utilization, Yudi Krishnandi, and the Minister of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, Johanna Yembise, came to visit Marguerite's home. But Marguerite didn't welcome them. She told them plainly and without hesitation never to come back. At the time, many still hoped that Engeline had simply run away, maybe to escape what she was going through at home. Some feared she'd been kidnapped while playing with her foster sister. The possibilities were horrifying, but no one imagined just how dark the truth would be. Meanwhile, a neighbor from Pekanbaru stepped forward, saying she had seen nothing but love between Marguerite and Engeline, that they looked like normal mother and daughter. Marguerite's lawyer, Hatma Sitompo, echoed that sentiment. He said Marguerite's love was so deep, she named Engeline after her own mother. Maybe that love was real in Marguerite's mind, but if it was a twisted kind of love, the kind that hurts more than it heals. So when Christina, the foster sister living in the US, shared this missing persons poster online about Engeline, the media picked up the story fast. When reporters reached out to Yvonne, she told them the last time she saw Engeline was around 3 p.m., playing in the garden. She searched until 6 p.m., but when she couldn't find her, she went to the police. From there, the investigation moved quickly. Police traced Engeline's origins back to Banyuwangi, her birth town. They reviewed CCTV footage from surrounding areas. There were no signs of her leaving. The CCTV showed nothing. But Marguerite's behavior was starting to raise red flags. She seemed tense. Her eyes darted every time the police came near. There was a door in the house, just an ordinary door at a glance, but no one could open it without Marguerite's permission. When investigators asked, she refused. Her face turned red. She shouted at them, "No." And that's when something strange happened. When the search dogs were released, they didn't wander aimlessly. They ran straight to a single location and started circling. It wasn't around the house. It wasn't down the street. It was somewhere closer, much closer, and that changed everything. On Wednesday, June 10th, 2015, investigators finally decided to dig. It was a small corner of the yard, near the chicken coop, beneath a banana tree. What they found there would stay etched in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. Beneath a pile of trash mixed with feathers, filth, and chicken droppings, they found Engeline. Her small body was half decomposed, her skin pale and bruised. She was still clutching her favorite doll. That detail, the doll, broke people. The officers, the neighbors, even the press. Some onlookers cried out, their voices cracking with disbelief. This was the same girl who used to greet them with a smile from the gate, the one with the wide eyes and quiet kindness. And now she was gone, discarded like garbage. Her remains were sent to Sangla Hospital for an autopsy, and the results were devastating. Engeline had died approximately 3 weeks before she was found. Her small body showed clear signs of violence, wounds on her face, neck, arms, and legs, bruises, scratches. A cigarette burn marked her back. Her wrists showed signs of being bound, likely with plastic rope, but the fatal blow came from a blunt object, a strike to the face and head that caused a fatal brain hemorrhage. Later, her body was returned to Banyuwangi, her mother's hometown, and buried in Wadung Pal, Tulungrejo, a quiet place far from the noise of Denpasar. When the news broke, Indonesia froze. Hope, however small, was gone. The little girl whose photo had been shared thousands of times online wasn't coming home. And as the disturbing details emerged, the nation demanded answers. Who did this and why? And then came a witness. Agus Tai Hamba Mai, a former helper who once worked in the room, came forward. He said that just one day before Engeline disappeared, he had seen her with a bloody nose after Marguerite had punched her. The Denpasar police quickly rounded up 7 people connected to the case. Marguerite, Yvonne, Christina, Agus Tai Hamba Mai, a couple who rented a room in the house, Ramat Handono, and Susiani, and Dewa Ketut Raka, a security guard hired after Engeline went missing. Most had alibis that checked out, but 2 names stood out, Marguerite and Agus. Agus was the first to break. Pressed by investigators, he confessed. He said he assaulted and killed Engeline on May 16th, just 3 days before her birthday. He He claimed to have buried her body in the backyard around 8 p.m. But something about his story didn't sit right. Details were vague, timelines didn't match. The investigators pushed harder, and then the twist came. Agus changed his statement. He said he didn't act alone. In fact, he wasn't even the one who delivered the fatal blows. According to him, the person who did that was Marguerite, the foster mother. The woman who had adopted Engeline, the one who said she loved her like a daughter. His claims were backed by forensic evidence, blood traces, impact analysis, autopsy reports, even items found at the scene. What really happened on May 16, 2015 would only come to light weeks later. That day, inside the house on Jalan Sarap Malam, Marguerite snapped. She dragged Engeline across the floor by her hair. The force was so strong that strands of the little girl's hair were pulled out. She slapped her repeatedly, so many times that her cheeks turned red and swollen. Then she began punching her, not once, not twice, over and over, until Engeline hit a piece of furniture and collapsed. But Marguerite didn't stop there. She grabbed the girl by her collar and punched her again, this time straight in the face. Blood started to drip from Engeline's nose, then from her ears, signs of internal bleeding. She was losing consciousness. Her breathing grew shallow. Blood began to fill her mouth. As Engeline lay there, fighting for her life, Marguerite stood over her, and then she called for her house helper, Agus. He came running into the room and stopped in shock. The little girl was barely moving, blood on her face, her small frame trembling. He asked, "Why did you do this to Engeline, ma'am?" Marguerite didn't answer. She walked up to him, looked him in the eye, and said coldly, "Shut up and do as I say. Don't you dare tell anyone, or else," then came the bribe, "I will give you 200 million rupiah on the 24th. Go back to Sumba. Don't come back." She told him to bring a bedsheet, a rope, and Engeline's favorite doll. Then something unthinkable. Take off her clothes, rape her. Those two words, Agus would later say, shattered something inside him. Even if she wasn't her biological child, how could a mother say that? Agus refused. Marguerite, calm and cold, lit a cigarette and pressed it onto Engeline's skin. Then ordered Agus to dig. The hole was shallow, about 50 centimeters deep, dug with a hoe in the backyard beside the chicken coop. Once it was ready, Agus carried Engeline's body, tied in plastic rope, and laid her inside. They covered the grave with bamboo poles, an old bottle basket, and chicken feed to hide the disturbed soil. And then, as if nothing had happened, Marguerite began acting. She knocked on doors, asked neighbors if they had seen Engeline, played the part of a worried mother looking for her child. On June 14, 2015, the truth finally caught up. Marguerite was named a suspect and taken into custody. On June 28th, she was officially declared the main perpetrator of the murder, based on 3 key pieces of evidence. The detailed testimony from Agus, the autopsy report from Sangla Hospital, and forensic findings from the crime scene. Agus, while not involved in the killing itself, was charged as an accomplice for helping cover up the crime and dispose of the body. On July 6, the police held a reenactment of the crime, attended by a crowd of onlookers, many of them mothers. The scenes were acted out based on testimony from both Agus and Marguerite. As the sequence unfolded, many in the crowd broke down. They wept openly, unable to hold back their emotions as they imagined the fear and pain Engeline must have felt on that day. Just a few days earlier, on July 2nd, Marguerite had filed a pre-trial lawsuit through her lawyer Hatma Sitompul. He argued that the accusations were absurd, that Marguerite loved Engeline and would never harm her. But the court rejected the appeal. There was no strong evidence in her favor, and the argument couldn't stand against what the investigation had uncovered. So the trial officially began on October 22nd, 2015. Yvonne and Christina, Margaret's two daughters, were present. Much attention was placed on Yvonne's original statement that she had last seen Angeline playing in the garden. It was a claim now proven false. Yvonne insisted she only learned of her sister's death from the police and claimed she had even received ransom messages from strangers on the day of Angeline's disappearance. But the police denied this, saying no such reports had ever been filed. They challenged her to produce evidence, and none came. People began to question how could Angeline be buried in the backyard and no one in the house notice? Was Yvonne trying to cover something up? Still, investigators found no evidence that she was involved in the murder. Maybe she panicked, maybe she was trying to protect someone, or maybe in the chaos she just got it wrong. In the end, Yvonne faded from the headlines, but the doubt never fully disappeared. Margaret, throughout the proceedings, maintained her innocence. She said she would never kill her angel. Her lawyer continued to blame Agus, claiming he murdered Engeline to cover up sexual abuse. But Agus's lawyer, Hotman Paris, presented a different theory. He argued that Margaret killed Engeline to gain control of her inheritance. According to the adoption agreement, Engeline had been listed as one of the heirs to Margaret and Douglas's assets. If she died, her share would be redistributed. On February 2nd, 2016, prosecutors confirmed that they believed money was Margaret's motive. At first, she may have adopted Angeline with good intentions, but after Douglas died, anxiety grew. She became paranoid that Angeline would inherit too much. And that paranoia, combined with the stress of caregiving, turned into something darker. Also, while early forensic reports suggested there might have been semen on her body, which raised suspicions of sexual assault, later tests couldn't confirm it. Even though at first Agus confessed to raping and killing Angeline, his statements kept changing, and no clear forensic proof was found, so the court did not pursue any sexual assault charges. Agus was sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined 1 billion rupiah for helping conceal the crime and failing to protect Angeline. 2 days later, Margaret was sentenced to life imprisonment. Her defense team called it a delusional sentence. But for many in Indonesia, it was justice. The ruling was finalized on February 29, 2016. Margaret would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Agus's sentence was later reduced to 10 years. Both filed appeals, and all were rejected. By February 2017, the case was legally closed. Years later, on December 6, 2024, news broke that Margaret had passed away. She had been battling chronic kidney failure and had required dialysis twice a week since July. After a long struggle, she died inside Keberokan's Class 2A Women's Detention Center. And with that, the case finally reached its end, but the memory of Angeline never faded. Angeline's case didn't just make headlines, it shook the country to its core. It exposed the cracks in a system meant to protect and reminded the world that cruelty doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from behind the same doors we call home. But even in her short life, Angeline left behind something powerful, a symbol of resilience, a child who kept smiling, kept learning, kept surviving until the very end. On her birthday, people still light candles, say prayers, and share her story. And as long as her story is told, she won't be forgotten, not as a victim, but as a child who deserved love, whose light continues to shine through the darkness she never chose. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.